Canadian police say 5 people have been injured in the western city of Edmonton, Alberta, in what they are treating as terror attacks. On Saturday night, a white car smashed a traffic control barricade and sent an officer flying into the air. An Islamic State group flag was found inside the vehicle. Police say the driver then got out and stabbed the officer before fleeing on foot. A manhunt ensued and a suspect was arrested after driving a van into at least 4 pedestrians.
To Edmonton next, where we're learning more today about a suspected lone wolf terror attack. Police say a Somali national, a man in his 30s, is in custody after a suspect rammed a van into a police officer and then viciously stabbed him. This all happened outside a football game as it was letting out. That was followed by a high-speed chase and further attacks. In all, 5 people were hurt, including the officer and 4 pedestrians.
At approximately 8:15 p.m. yesterday evening, September 30th, an Edmonton Police Service police officer was working traffic control duties during the Edmonton Eskimos football game. The uniformed officer was standing behind a traffic barricade and in front of his police vehicle at an intersection near 107A Avenue and 92nd Street, just southwest of Commonwealth Stadium. The flashing lights of the police vehicle were activated at the time to improve visibility. Suddenly and without notice, and at a high rate of speed, a male driving a white Chevrolet Malibu crashed through the traffic barricades that were separating vehicles from pedestrians. The vehicle struck the police officer, sending him flying into the air 15 feet before colliding with the officer's cruiser, again at a high rate of speed.
I've never seen anything like that when I've worked, so it is what it is, but it was crazy. Like, just came around the corner ripping. It looked, I thought at first he was just like pulling over for the cops coming by, but he was the one they were chasing.
Police say the suspect is known to police. They also confirmed that an ISIS flag was seized from the car that allegedly struck the officer. The officer who was struck has been released from hospital. He's expected to recover. 2 of the pedestrians have also been released from hospital. Edmonton police are working alongside the RCMP's integrated national security enforcement team as they continue to investigate. In response to the attack, the Prime Minister says the Government of Canada stands with the people of Edmonton. In a statement, Justin Trudeau says we cannot and will not let violent extremism take root in our communities. We know that Canada's strength comes from our diversity, and we will not be cowed by those who seek to divide us or promote fear. Edmonton is a strong and resilient city, and I'm confident that its citizens will support one another to overcome this tragic event.
Police in Edmonton, Canada are investigating what they believe to be 2 related acts of terrorism. In one incident, a man rammed a police barricade outside a Canadian Football League game, sending an officer flying into the air. The man then got out and stabbed the officer. He has been arrested. In the other incident, later that night, a truck barreled into a group of pedestrians at a crosswalk. 4 people were injured. Here's Edmonton Police Chief Rod Knecht.
The driver was apprehended and is currently in police custody. It is believed at this time that these 2 incidents are related. Based on evidence at the scenes and the actions of the suspect, at 12:38 a.m. today, it was determined that these incidents are being investigated as acts of terrorism under Section 83.2 of the Criminal Code.
The conditions of the 4 victims and the police officer remain unknown.
We want to turn now to another breaking story this morning, a possible new terror attack in Canada.
A man stabbing a police officer, then ramming into pedestrians with a truck during a high-speed chase. And Ron is here covering that story. Ron, good morning.
Yeah, good morning to you, Dan and Paula. These are actually 2 separate incidents, hours apart. They happened Saturday night, the ramming of the police barricade, and later the vehicle mowing down pedestrians. Police say it was one suspect that did this, and that the motive appears right now to have been terrorism. It happened near Commonwealth Stadium in Edmonton, where a Canadian League pro football game was being played. Officials say the suspect, driving this white car at a high rate of speed, barreled through a police barricade outside the stadium, striking a police officer. That driver then got out of the car and went on the attack, stabbing a police officer several times. Police on the scene were able to identify the driver from the vehicle's registration.
The male suspect stabbed the officer several times before fleeing the scene on foot.
Several hours later, at a police checkpoint, officers stopped a U-Haul moving truck and noticed the name of the driver on his license was similar to that of the suspect they were looking for.
The U-Haul truck immediately fled the scene and was pursued by police officers towards downtown Edmonton.
Police say the driver of the U-Haul truck then took off, intentionally running down pedestrians along the way. At least 4 people on the street were struck. They are now being treated at a hospital. Officials say the 2 incidents are related and said they also found this flag, what they described as being an ISIS-like flag, displayed on the dashboard of the car that crashed outside the football stadium. They are investigating the incidents as a solo act of terrorism. And the suspect now in police custody. He has not yet been identified. Canadian law enforcement officials say they had no information about any imminent attack. That officer who was stabbed, he is expected, though, to survive.
One piece of good news. Ron,
Yeah.
thank
Ron.
you.
More breaking news on CBS 3 this morning. Canadian police are investigating what they're calling an act of terrorism. An Edmonton police officer was stabbed last night by a man who had crashed his car into a police barricade outside of a sports stadium there. And then police say 4 pedestrians were injured by a fleeing truck.
It is believed at this time that these 2 incidents are related. Based on evidence at the scenes and the actions of the suspect, at 12:38 a.m. today, it was determined that these incidents are being investigated as acts of terrorism.
Now, police say there was an ISIS flag found in one of the vehicles. Stay with CBS 3 and CBSPhilly.com for the very latest on this now breaking news story.
Approximately 8:15 p.m. yesterday evening, September 30th, an Edmonton police officer was working traffic control duties during the Edmonton Eskimos football game. Suddenly and without notice, and at a high rate of speed, a male driving a white Chevrolet Malibu crashed through the traffic barricades that were separating vehicles from pedestrians. The vehicle struck the police officer, sending him flying into the air 15 feet before colliding with the officer's cruiser, again at a high rate of speed. A male, believed to be 30 years old, then jumped out of his vehicle and viciously attacked the Edmonton Police Service member with a knife. A struggle then ensued, during which the male suspect stabbed the officer several times before fleeing the scene on foot, northbound, down 92nd Street. Just before midnight, a U-Haul truck was pulled over at a check stop location on Wayne Gretzky Drive and 112th Avenue. A police officer asked to see the license of the driver. When the document was presented, the officer recognized the name as being very similar to the registered owner of the Chevy Malibu. The U-Haul truck immediately fled the scene and was pursued by police officers towards downtown Edmonton. Throughout the chase, the truck deliberately attempted to hit pedestrians in crosswalks and alleys in 2 areas along Jasper Avenue. Currently, we know of at least 4 citizens that have been injured and taken to hospital. The event concluded when the U-Haul truck flipped on Jasper Avenue due to police interaction. The driver was apprehended and is currently in police custody. It is believed at this time that these 2 incidents are related. Based on evidence at the scenes and the actions of the suspect, at 12:38 a.m. today, it was determined that these incidents are being investigated as acts of terrorism under Section 83.2 of the Criminal Code. We currently believe this individual acted alone. The investigation is in its very early stages, and we are urging Edmontonians to be vigilant and aware of their surroundings. Thank you again for attending. I am now in a position to give you additional details about the events that transpired last night on the evening of September 30th, 2017. At 8:15 p.m., a male drove his car through a police barricade, hitting a police officer and crashing into a police car. He then got out of his car and stabbed the officer several times with a large knife. Even though he had been knocked into the air by the impact of the car, the police officer was able to fend off the attacker, which resulted in the attacker leaving the scene. I can confirm that our police officer, Constable Mike Chernick, was released from hospital last night and will make a full recovery. I met with the constable at 1 p.m. today at his residence. He is in good spirits, although his injuries are substantial. He has stab wounds on his face and head from the knife attack, and significant abrasions on his arms as a result of being hit by the car. For those of you that saw the video released earlier this morning, he was in a struggle for his life, holding on to his gun with one hand and blocking the knife with his other. It is a testament to his experience and training that he survived the confrontation. We now know that the attacker left the vicinity of Commonwealth Stadium on foot. A tentative description of the attacker, along with his name, was broadcast to police officers across the city. In response, checkpoints were set up in areas surrounding Commonwealth Stadium. Two very astute police officers, including one who has only been working in the streets for 2 weeks, set up at a location along Wayne Gretzky Drive. A large U-Haul truck stopped at the checkpoint and provided his personal information. One police officer recognized the name on the driver's license as the same name that had been broadcast earlier and returned to his police car to request additional support. At that moment, the U-Haul truck fled. Because of the serious nature of the attack on the police officer a few hours earlier, a senior supervisor directed that the vehicle was to be pursued and stopped. This is always a difficult decision to make, to chase a vehicle or to let it go. Based on all the information available at the time, that a police officer had been struck with a car and stabbed, and the possibility that the U-Haul truck could be used as a weapon, the decision was to stop the vehicle. Details of the U-Haul's criminal flight from Wayne Gretzky Drive to Jasper Avenue are sobering. The truck drove left of center on several occasions, nearly T-boned at least one vehicle, and attempted to run over civilians who were crossing at crosswalks and alleys on Jasper Avenue. Unfortunately, 4 individuals were actually struck. We have only limited information on the condition of these victims. Their injuries range from broken limbs to brain bleeds. One who was in critical condition last night has been upgraded to stable condition, and 2 have been released from hospital. While we are grateful nobody was killed, this is still a terrible tragedy for the victims, their families, and our broader community. The vehicle continued down Jasper Avenue and was showing no signs of slowing down. As a result, a deliberate tactical maneuver by a police vehicle was authorized and successfully executed, causing the suspect vehicle to roll onto its side. Officers then broke the windshield and used a loud, banging stun grenade to distract the driver. No shots were fired. In fact, no shots were fired anywhere in this entire incident. Tactical team members then attempted to remove the driver. He resisted, so a conducted electrical weapon or taser was used to temporarily disable him. That allowed officers to remove him from the U-Haul truck and arrest him. It is Edmonton Police Service policy that every individual who is tasered must be seen by a doctor before they are questioned. That examination is now complete, and we are currently questioning the individual. Note that he has not yet been charged, but he is under arrest for the following offenses. Section 83.18, participation in a terrorist act. Section 83.2, commission of an offense for a terrorist group. Section 239 sub 1, 5 counts of attempted murder. Section 249 sub 1, dangerous driving. Section 249.1 sub 3, criminal flight causing bodily harm. And finally, Section 88 sub 1, possession of a weapon for a dangerous purpose. I want to assure all Edmontonians that from all indications, it appears that this was a single individual acting alone. We continue to explore several investigative leads, so this could change. We are actually less than 24 hours into this investigation. We have no reason to believe that there is any threat to our city, but we encourage citizens to be vigilant and to report any unusual or suspicious activities to our police complaint line. I will now hand the podium over to Assistant Commissioner Marlon DeGrand for an update on the terrorism-related aspects
of this investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attendance here. I can state that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Edmonton Police Service have been working closely in partnership on this matter all night and into this morning to gather the evidence that is needed in this case to pursue terrorism and other criminal charges. It is this seamless integration between the Edmonton Police Service and the RCMP's Integrated National Security Enforcement Team which has allowed for such quick reaction. The RCMP's Integrated National Security Enforcement Team was engaged moments after the initial events took place. By way of explanation, the INSET is a RCMP-led initiative which involves partnerships with the Edmonton Police, the Calgary Police, Canada Border Services, Alberta Sheriffs, and the Canadian Security Intelligence Service within the province of Alberta. Its mandate is to look at investigations into national security matters that touch upon or involve citizens or individuals within the province of Alberta. As was stated last night, the suspect in this case is actually known to the Edmonton Police Service and the RCMP. We are limited, as you can imagine, as to what information we can provide you due to privacy concerns, but also, and most importantly, due to this very fluid ongoing investigation. That stated, we can confirm that in 2015, a complaint was filed with the Edmonton Police Service around reports being made that the suspect was espousing extremist ideology. Due to the possible nexus to national security, the K Division Integrated National Security Enforcement Team, or KINSAT, was notified and an investigation was initiated. As a part of that 2015 investigation, members of the K Division INSET interviewed, among others, this suspect as well. At the end of that exhaustive investigation, there was insufficient evidence to pursue terrorism charges or a peace bond. Further, the suspect was actually not deemed at that time to pose a threat to the security of Canada, based upon the information that was available to investigators. The current investigation is progressing well, and we currently anticipate charges will be laid in the very near future. That stated, I can't yet provide you with the confirmation of the name of the suspect, although we're aware that that's being reported in some circles. I can state that the suspect is a Somalian national who is currently in Canada and is in the refugee claimant process. The RCMP and our partners at the Edmonton Police Service are confident that the 2015 allegations were investigated to their fullest. We must operate, of course, within the confines of the law, and it's important to reiterate that the suspect showed no signs of active recruitment or radicalization to violence at that time. We had no intelligence that warranted keeping this suspect under investigation any further, and to date, that suspect, up until yesterday, up until the times of this event, I apologize, had no negative interactions of a criminal nature with police. The RCMP continue to work collaboratively with an array of agencies, departments, and community partners, including the Canada Centre for Community Engagement and Violence Prevention, to use all available tools to prevent violent extremism from committing a terrorist, violent extremists, from committing a terrorist offense at home or abroad. At this point, it appears that this was the actions of one individual, and no others were involved in the planning or execution of this event. Should this investigation lead us to believe that more were involved in this particular individual, in this particular incident, then those individuals will also fall focus of this investigation and be held accountable. But again, I would like to reiterate that at this time, this appears to be the isolated incident involving a single individual. That stated, anybody with any information about this incident or any other national security information is encouraged to immediately call the police force of jurisdiction or the RCMP's National Security Information Network. And the number for that is 1-800-420-5805. I would like to also, as was expressed by Chief Connect, express our thoughts are with the victims and the families and the citizens of Edmonton following this horrific event. And I'd ask that Chief Connect come forward to the podium before we open this for questions.
Just put up your hands, please, and identify yourself in the meeting.
So, folks, just before I take questions, the investigation, as stated by both of us, it's very fluid, quickly evolving and changing as we speak. As I stated earlier, we're less than 24 hours into it, and it will continue to evolve. I can tell you now we will have another media session tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock where we will be providing you with further information as the investigation evolves over the next 12 to 24 hours.
Janet Dirk, CTV National News. This is for Chief Connect. Do we know if the rented that U-Haul, and was anything found? We've heard reports of a manifesto with anti-Semitic words on it.
I can tell you we believe he rented that vehicle. I can't provide any further information specific to that.
Johnny Wakefield, Edmonton Journal. Chief Connect, there were a number of police at 113th Avenue apartment today. I believe they were doing searches. Can you confirm that that was the residence of the suspect? And if so, was anything found in those searches that's relevant to this investigation?
Okay, I won't confirm any locations of searches at this time. We may be able to provide that information tomorrow. I can tell you that we are conducting searches throughout the city. We have multiple crime scenes as well as multiple locations to search, and we would provide further information to that effect tomorrow.
Janice Johnson from CBC, Chief Connect. You mentioned the 4 pedestrians that had been struck last night. I think you accounted for 3 of them, so I just wanted to double check on the 4th. You mentioned broken limbs, brain bleeds. 1 patient had been updated from critical to stable, and 2 had been released from hospital. What about that 4th patient?
Okay, so a 4th patient had suffered a fractured skull and has regained consciousness.
Can you describe what condition that person is in?
No, I can't. I've gotten that secondhand, and obviously medical information is not readily distributed, but I can tell you that, like I said, 2 are gone out from the hospital, 2 are still being held for observation and perhaps further treatment.
And a follow-up, there's been varying numbers about how many police cars were in pursuit of that U-Haul van. Are you able to clarify?
I don't have a number myself. I believe there was 4 at one point.
Some bystanders said 20. I guess that's an exaggeration?
I don't know for sure the number. I do know tactical was involved, police service dogs were involved, but I think trailing the immediate vehicle would probably be 4 as others joined in once the vehicle was incapacitated.
I think this gentleman right here.
Chief, this is something reported all over the world with the White House even making a statement on this. Why is this a terrorist attack just 3 hours after the incident, so early in the investigation? Unlike other modern attacks in Edmonton which resulted in deaths.
That was a statement made by...
No, the question is, why is this a terrorist attack just 3 hours after the incidents have happened? Which is unlike other incidences in Edmonton that have resulted in deaths.
So it was declared a terrorist act based on the evidence that we had. The attack on our police officer and the subsequent investigation on Jasper Avenue.
But what's that evidence?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, Paula Simons from the Edmonton Journal. You say you declared it a terrorist incident based on the evidence that you have. Can you share with us any sense of what that evidence would be, and what makes you convinced that this is an act of terrorism as opposed to a violent crime?
If I might as well, Chief, just for clarity, this investigation is being pursued as a potential act of terrorism. No terrorism charges have been made yet. It's the totality of the information, the actions of the suspect, and the evidence, which we will later on have to lead in court, that gave us pause to consider this and determine that we need to pursue this as a potential terrorist act. That stated the specific evidence beyond what's already been spoken to. This stuff is information that we actually have to be a little careful about because we do have to guard the integrity of the court process going forward. So I'm probably not going to be in a position today to speak to that, but I can tell you it was the nature of the incident, the nature of the evidence that was found at the initial scenes, and the actions of the suspect that made us feel that we had to investigate it potentially as a terrorist act.
Can you confirm all the media reports that there was an ISIS flag in the car?
I believe the chief actually confirmed that last night.
So that would be...
Yeah, that's out in the public. Okay.
Yeah.
It's Janet Dirks again from CTV National News for you, sir.
Yes,
after the RCMP spoke with him in 2015, did the suspect remain on a watch list? Did you keep him under surveillance? Were you always aware of his activities from that time?
Like any other citizen, we have files that we keep if we are engaged in an investigation around them. The information and the result of that investigation was shared with our law enforcement partners, not only with the Edmonton Police Service, but also with our intelligence partners across the province and nationally. That information still is retained within our national security holdings. That stated, there was no active investigation that flowed from that, from the National Security Enforcement Team, because we have to have a reasonable suspicion, or we need to have reasonable ground, not reasonable grounds, we have to have actions or activities that would warrant, under law, our investigation of a citizen or an individual within our country. At this particular time, we didn't have sufficient evidence to warrant continued investigation of that individual following the 2015.
Yeah.
Jason Marks.
Ma'am, sorry.
Kirby Barr with 630 Chet. You said the gentleman was, yes please, he was investigated in 2015 as a refugee claimant. Can you tell us when he arrived in Canada, and has he been in Canada this entire time?
I can state that I know that information, but right now, because this is an ongoing investigation, I'm a little bit reluctant to speak to that at this particular moment. I think as information evolves and we're able to speak to identity of the individual, we could probably be in a position to speak to that at a later time. Right now, I think kind of an abundance of caution and respect for the investigative process and not wanting to taint that in any potential prosecution, I probably want to state that I'll reserve comment on that.
John?
Johnny Wakefield, Edmonton Journal, also a follow-up along those lines. Can you speak to why RCMP are releasing the nationality of the individual and his claimant status?
There's a lot of interest that's been expressed in that, not just locally here, but this has actually garnered a lot of international and national attention. It was one of those questions that would, if we didn't actually speak to it ourselves, it was going to be posed, I'm sure, by the folks in this audience anyway. And rather than attempt to look evasive on something that we could speak to, although we can't speak to identity, we felt it appropriate to speak to the things that we could speak to.
Jason Marcus from Claims Magazine. Regarding the initial complaint into this fellow that prompted the initial investigation and subsequent interviews, was there ever any suspicion that was he ever being investigated as part of a larger group or a group of individuals or complained about as a group of individuals espousing extremist group?
My understanding of the investigation is no. It was the complaint was about this individual espousing radical ideology, but it was only isolated to that particular individual.
Sorry, to clarify, so in other words, throughout the course of the RCMP and INSET's investigation with this fellow, he was always investigated as an individual, not as part of any group or a cluster?
That's correct. In the 2015 investigation and so far throughout this investigation, we've seen no nexus of connectivity to him, from him to any other individuals.
Any other individuals, sorry, just to clarify, locally or overall?
Specific individuals overall, no.
3 more questions, Janice?
Janice Johnson, CBC. This would be for both of you, I think, sirs. There's been a lot of vitriol already on social media about this, and perhaps with word that this person was a refugee claimant from Somalia could escalate that even more. What message do you have for members of the Muslim community who may be, well, fearing a backlash right now?
Well, I can tell you that as we tried to express here repeatedly, this is an individual that is responsible for these crimes. If there are any other individuals that we're working with, assisting or involved in the planning or execution of this, their names will come to light. They will be dealt with individually. But I know from personal relationships that I have within the greater Edmonton community that none of our citizens, Muslim or other, support this kind of activity. I think you'll hear that loud and clear from those within that area. And I can tell you that this is an individual that has to be held accountable for his specific actions, and I don't think that we need to think beyond that.
Chief Connect?
Sir.
Omar Mosley.
I'd ask Chief Connect the same question.
Oh, sorry.
So we've already started engaging our various communities around Edmonton. I've got a Chiefs Advisory Committee that the Somali community and other communities have representation on that committee. We dialogue with those folks, and we'll continue to do so. I mean, this is Edmonton. We're a very tolerant community. We're a very tolerant society. That's what makes us unique. We're Canadians, and I mean, we tolerate. I mean, we have tremendous tolerance, and we welcome everybody. And this is just an isolated situation involving a single individual, and I don't think we can make any broad statements or broad assumptions or come to any broad conclusions based on a single incident involving a single individual at this time.
Sir? Omar Mosley, Metro News. Is there any indications for Chief Connect? Is there any indication that the second incident was planned rather than sort of prime opportunity?
I can't respond to that question at this time.
Last question.
Chief Connect, was there ever any concern that Commonwealth was a target, and was there talk of alerting fans in the stadium as to what was happening?
Nothing that we have at this time would indicate that.
I'm Courtney Terrio, standing outside of Edmonton Police Headquarters, where charges have now officially been laid against 30-year-old Abdullahi Hassan Sharif, the suspect in that violent rampage over the weekend that left 5 people injured, including a police officer. However, despite the laundry list of counts against Sharif, there's one notable absence: no terror charges.
5 counts of attempted murder.
Those charges headline the case against Abdullahi Hassan Sharif. The 30-year-old also faces counts of dangerous driving, criminal flight causing harm, and possession of a weapon. But while he was also arrested for terror activities, those counts have yet to be formally laid, as the potential motive is still being assessed.
Terrorism investigation is very complex and vast. It deals with political, religious, or ideological purposes, and we are still very much in the infancy stage. As we gather more information and evidence, that will obviously be reassessed, and if warranted, further charges will be pursued.
Police also offered us our first glimpse of the suspect, with facial injuries believed to have been sustained during the police chase. RCMP add that Sharif has convention refugee status and that they previously investigated him in 2015 on allegations of espousing extremist ideologies.
And that it was thoroughly investigated. However, at the time, there was no charges that were laid, and I can't speak to anything further in relation to that investigation, as it now forms part of our current investigation moving forward.
The police officer injured in the attack, Constable Mike Chernick, was released from hospital less than 24 hours after the incident and is said to be recovering. The prognosis is also improving for the 4 other people who were struck by the rampaging U-Haul.
2 continue to remain in hospital, and 1 is still in serious condition.
We may get our first view of Sharif tomorrow, as he is slated to make his first court appearance. He will be at the Edmonton Courthouse for a bail hearing at 9 a.m. In Edmonton, Courtney Terrio, City News.
Ottawa says there were no warning signs when the suspect in the Edmonton terror attack arrived in Canada 5 years ago from Somalia. Today, he was formally charged with mowing down a police officer and 4 pedestrians. CTV's Alberta Bureau Chief Janet Dirks has the latest.
Abdullahi Hassan Sharif has bruises on his face.
These injuries, we believe, were as a result of the 2 collisions that he was involved in.
The 30-year-old Somali refugee has been charged with 5 counts of attempted murder, accused of trying to kill Police Constable Mike Chernick, and for mowing down 4 pedestrians who happened to be on a busy street when a U-Haul came speeding down, followed by several police cruisers. 2 of the pedestrians remain in hospital, 1 with a fractured skull. The RCMP is holding off on terrorism charges for now. Its integrated national enforcement team is now in charge of the file.
And we are still very much in the infancy stage. This investigation is continuing, and it will take us some time.
Sharif came to Canada in 2012. In 2015, he was the subject of what the RCMP calls an exhaustive investigation after receiving complaints he was espousing extremist ideology.
It was thoroughly investigated. However, at the time, there was no charges that were laid.
This counterterrorism expert says it does not necessarily mean police dropped the ball.
It could be that in the last 3 years or 2 years, he further radicalized into violence, but maybe in 2015, he wasn't that close.
Investigators have been at different locations in the city, at Sharif's apartment complex and at U-Haul rental agencies. Sharif's bail hearing is scheduled for tomorrow. Janet Dirks, CTV News, Edmonton.